At 6:30 on a Monday morning, the building is full of people. A badge exception is waiting for security. A temperature complaint is waiting for facilities. An alarm notification has gone somewhere else entirely. The project team says the building is complete. The operating team is still trying to figure out who acts first.
That is the go-live gap. A building should not be called ready just because every system passed its individual test. It is ready when the people responsible for it can make decisions together under realistic conditions.
Welcome to Built, Wired, and Secured. I'm Alex Morgan. Today, I'm joined by Michael Harrington, who works from the property and continuity perspective, and James Rogers, a facilities and reliability leader. Gentlemen, does that first Monday sound familiar?
Very familiar. And the uncomfortable part is that none of those issues has to be dramatic. A door exception, a comfort complaint, and an unanswered notification can each look minor. Together, they tell you whether the building has an operating rhythm or just a collection of completed systems.
Exactly. The building can be technically correct and operationally confused.
Technically correct and operationally confused. That's a useful distinction. Michael, when someone says, "We're complete," what question has actually been answered?
Usually, the team is saying the contracted work is substantially finished, the equipment is installed, and the remaining items are manageable. That answers whether the project reached its delivery milestone. Commissioning goes further and asks whether the equipment performs as designed. But neither question necessarily tells you whether the night operator knows what to do when an alarm arrives, or whether a tenant gets a clear answer before frustration builds.
So, a successful demonstration is evidence, but not a verdict.
Right. Show me that a sensor reports, a unit responds, or an alarm appears, and you've confirmed a function. But now ask, what happens at 2 a.m? Who sees it? What do they check first? What can they change safely? And who decides that the issue is serious enough to notify the property team?
That is the handoff nobody rehearses.
Exactly. And what gets recorded, what gets communicated, and how the team closes the loop. The equipment may be doing precisely what it was designed to do, while the operation around it stalls.
Let's put people inside one of these tests. Say a tenant arrives early. The zone is still in its scheduled setback, and an access event is flagged as unusual. Security sees one part of the story. Facilities sees another. The tenant calls a service desk. What should happen next?
First, the people involved should know what information matters. Is the space expected to be occupied? Is the temperature issue actually connected to the schedule? Is the access event a safety concern or simply an exception that needs verification? If the teams have practiced the conversation, they can separate those questions quickly. If not, everyone forwards the issue to someone else.
And the first test is not, did the screen show green? It is, who opens the ticket, who calls the tenant, and who is allowed to make the temporary adjustment?
Yes, from an operational standpoint, clarity is a service. Tenants feel this immediately when the building team is uncertain, even if the underlying equipment is functioning normally.
Michael, you mentioned interruptions earlier. How would you test one without turning readiness into a disruptive full-scale exercise?
Use a controlled scenario that matches the building's risk. For example, discuss an after-hours connectivity interruption. What breaks if this goes down?
And who is allowed to make the first decision?
Exactly. Who recognizes the interruption? Who has authority to use the temporary process? How do security and facilities communicate? What do occupants need to hear, and what should they not be told until the facts are clear? You can answer much of that in a tabletop review, then use a small targeted drill where real-time action matters.
Sometimes, but if the team has never used the new interface, a tabletop can hide the hardest part, the person who has to act in real time.
Now we're getting somewhere. Trust the process, but make the process prove something meaningful.
That also explains why isolated tests miss hidden dependencies. Each group can pass its own part and still leave the building without a shared response.
A contact list is a good example. It may contain facilities, IT, security, and service providers. But a working escalation path tells you who makes the first decision, who is the backup, what information travels with the issue, and when responsibility moves to another group.
And if that list says a service provider is available during normal business hours, but the building opens before that,
then the gap belongs to the operating plan, not to the calendar. Someone needs to know the evening procedure, the temporary authority, and the point at which the issue gets escalated. Otherwise, the first real incident becomes the training session.
That happens with building automation alarms too. The alarm is technically visible, but its priority is unclear. Is it something to observe? Something to acknowledge? Something that requires a call? If every alarm feels urgent, the team eventually treats none of them as urgent.
What does the maintenance team need before it accepts responsibility?
Not just drawings. We need operating sequences that match the building we received, understandable alarm priorities, recovery guidance, and training on the interfaces we will actually use. Then we need to know what routine maintenance looks like and whether the equipment can be reached safely and practically.
which part is most often missing?
The recovery step. People know how the system is supposed to start. They are less certain about what to do after an exception, a reset, or a temporary workaround. Reliability starts with disciplined maintenance, but it also starts with disciplined transition.
And that recovery step has a property consequence. If a temporary process continues for 3 weeks, who knows about it? Who reviews it? Who tells occupants what has changed? Hidden risk is harder than acknowledged risk because nobody is managing it.
This is where people may worry that readiness means creating a mountain of paperwork.
It should mean the opposite. Keep the evidence useful. A short scenario record, confirmed roles, a contact path that reflects actual coverage, and a prioritized list of open risks. The best day in operations is the one nobody notices, but quiet operations are built on information people can use under pressure.
Every unresolved item should have an accountable role, a consequence, and a review date. A minor documentation gap may be acceptable for a short period. An unclear response to a critical alarm is a different decision entirely.
So the goal is not to pretend the building has no imperfections. The goal is to make the remaining risk visible enough that someone can consciously manage it.
Yes, and involve the people who will actually live with the result. Property operations, facilities, IT, security, project leadership, and representatives of the occupants do not need to run the same exercise every time. They do need to share the important assumptions.
If a listener has a major occupancy coming up next week or a significant system change coming soon, what is the smallest useful review they can run?
Bring the right functions together and choose 2 or 3 scenarios. One normal but busy situation, one likely service interruption, one condition where a tenant or occupant needs a clear answer. Then ask, who sees it, who decides, who communicates, and how do we recover?
Have each person describe the first 15 minutes, not the ideal response. What do they see? What do they record? Who do they call? Where do they wait for permission? If the answers diverge, you have found a readiness issue, while it is still affordable to fix.
And then rank what you find. Do not give a confusing label the same weight as an unclear response to a critical condition.
Right. The review should produce decisions, not just observations. If an item remains open, name the accountable role and the date it will be revisited. Tenants feel the difference when uncertainty stays inside the operating team instead of being passed to them.
Let me reduce this to 3 questions. Can the responsible people respond together to a realistic situation? Do they know the handoffs, the escalation path, and the temporary workaround? And is every important remaining risk visible, prioritized, and owned?
If the answer is yes, you have more than a closeout package. You have the beginning of a dependable operating process.
And if the answer is no, that is useful information, not failure. Find the gap before occupants have to discover it for you.
That wraps up this episode of Built, Wired, and Secured.
Today, we looked at the difference between a building being technically complete and being ready for real operations. Before your next occupancy or major system change, bring the right people together, walk through a few realistic scenarios, and give every unresolved risk an owner.
If this discussion was useful, share it with the property, facilities, IT, security, or project leaders preparing for a transition. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. Until next time, make sure the systems you're responsible for are built to last, wired with intention, and secured for the real world.